In the matter of a mining permit for parcel 14227 on Dogwood Ridge, the chairman said, tapping his papers against the wood like a metronome. Is there any final opposition before we vote? I stood, the hem of my good church dress brushing my calves, and took the mic from a boy who still had acne. Read the clause. Those 3 words ricocheted off the panelled walls of the Laurel County Courthouse like a handful of quarters spilled on a diner floor. Kendra froze halfway into a smirk. The developer's smile flattened into a line. My son, God bless him, couldn't look at me. The room breathed in and held it, like the last second before a summer storm breaks. Before I rewind, hit subscribe so you don't miss these, and tell me what city you're watching from. I love seeing where folks are tuning in. Now, let me take you back to how we got here. 10 months earlier, a cold Monday with a sky the colour of chalk, I was a 68-year-old widow drinking black coffee by the kitchen window of the farmhouse my granddaddy built in Laurel Ridge, North Carolina. The pecan tree out front had rattled its last leaves, and the hens stalked the frost like gossipy ladies in shawls, annoyed at what the weather dared to do. My name is Ruth Ann McAllister, on paper, though nobody says it like that here. Folks just drawl it together. Ruth Ann. I grew up pulling rocks out of red clay, keeping ledgers in a school library no one paid much attention to, and staying married to a man who loved me enough to split the last biscuit, even when he'd only had coffee and pride for breakfast. He's gone now. 3 years. Stroke in the hayfield. He fell like a tree. I buried him under the big oak, and I talked to him there, which I suppose makes me one of those women some people whisper about at Food Lion. Let them whisper. I've earned my ghosts. That morning, I'd gone out to the shed to get the box of bulbs I'd promised to plant along the front fence, and instead I found an old cigar box my husband, Eli, used to stash buckeyes and curious things. Inside was a folded map, brittle as a communion wafer, and 2 black and white photos of men standing in a creek with a sluice box, dated 1931. On the back, Eli had written, in that straight print of his, "Ridge vein runs true. Ask Doc Griner about assays." Quietly. I remember saying it out loud to the dust motes. Well, isn't that something? We are a place of mining stories. Folks forget that North Carolina had its gold rush before California ever did. There are creeks out here that gleam after a rain like somebody broke a bottle of whiskey in them. I'd always teased Eli that his talk of microveins and alluvial fans was just a way to keep his boots in the water because he couldn't sit still. He was a tinkerer, a man who believed in maps and patience and doing things the right way, which is not the same as the quick way. Remember that detail. I tucked the map back in the box, wrapped in a dish towel like a newborn, and set it on top of the pantry because my to-do list that day had call insurance, pay electric, and fix co-op latch before investigate potential gold on my land. The last one felt like the setup to a joke anyway. A widow with goats and a pickup finds treasure in the ground. It's the sort of story Kendra would roll her eyes at and call farm brain. Kendra is my daughter-in-law. If you can imagine a blonde blowout that has its own thoughts, you can picture her. She came into our lives 8 years ago by way of Charlotte, where she met my son, Caleb, at a teriyaki place on a rainy Tuesday. She makes her living staging houses and hosting a podcast about elevating your lifestyle, which is a polite way to tell people they're tacky unless they buy what you're selling. She's ambitious. She's funny when she's not threatened. And she never met a mirror she didn't like. I was standing by the sink when her Lexus came crunching up the gravel with one tire crunch that sounded off. She parks crooked and fast. That's her signature. She walked in without knocking, threw her purse on my table like she was reserving it, and kissed the air 2 inches from my cheek. "Ruth, light of my life," she sang. I was in Mossy Creek looking at a listing and thought I'd swing by. Did you get the jelly I left last week? I did. It was nice, I said, meaning both the jelly and the attempt. Behind her, my grandson, Jesse, hung back halfway in the doorway, twisting the string on his hoodie with fingers that had grease under the nails because he's his father's son and likes machines that sputter and improve. He is 15 and taller than me now. He still calls me Mimi, even when his friends are around. That means more to me than he can guess. Caleb was at the hardware store, working, because that's what he does. Kendra sat and started arranging my salt and pepper like props. So, she said brightly, we need to talk about a plan for spring. It's worth pausing to understand what plan means to Kendra. It means what she decided earlier that week, preferably in a blazer. It means, I will say this nice enough you can pretend it's your idea. She had decided I needed to sell the farm. The county had upped our taxes, the roof needed a new patch, and I have a heart that had stuttered once last summer during the Bluegrass Festival, which gave them an opening. I don't need to sell, I said. I need to prune the orchard and stop making excuses. You want a biscuit? She sighed, like I'd missed my cue. Ruth, sweetheart, no one's saying you can't manage. That's exactly what you're saying. What I am saying is, there is a family who would die to be on acreage. We'd get you something gorgeous in a new community closer to us. An HOA? I made a face like a cat with peanut butter on its tongue. You want me to be told what color I can paint my door? Be serious, she said, and there it was. You're scared of getting older and it's making you stubborn. I didn't get to 80 miles an hour in that moment because my grandson threw me a look that said, subtle as a flinch, please don't fight. That boy doesn't ask for much. He stashed a comic book on my bookshelf in 6th grade, and it's still there because he never asked me to move it. So I swallowed. I said, I'll think about it. That night, after they left, I sat with the cigar box again and thought about the creek and about Eli's handwriting. I thought about what's fair. I have never been greedy. I have been practical. I kept ledgers for 27 years at the high school because I loved kids who needed one person to remind them a library isn't a prison with nicer chairs. It's a door. By the next week, the plan had become an appointment with a financial advisor Kendra swears by, the sort of man whose business card has foil on it. He told me, with a handshake too warm, that acreages were illiquid and that unlocking the value for me would be win-win. He used the phrase silver tsunami like it was cute. I smiled and thought about that dish towel-wrapped map. And that's when I made the call. Not to a bank, to the county records office. Do you all still have copies of mineral rights filings from the 50s? I asked the clerk, a woman with a lazy drawl like molasses. We do, Miss Ruth, she said. They're dusty, but they're there. What about an assay report from 1992? Dr. Greiner would have signed it. That'll be in the Greiner box. He never threw a paper away. Could I come by? You can. Why? For my memory, I said. Before I can't remember anything. You should know this. My memory is better than it used to be. All the talk about me slipping was a story other people liked telling because it made their plans easier. I still misplace my reading glasses in the freezer sometimes. But I can recite line breaks from Mary Oliver and every single birthday of anyone I've ever loved. And I do not forget what people said when they thought I was too polite to hold it against them. Remember that. Over the next month, I did it all. Fed goats, paid bills, put salt on the steps when they iced up. And I also sat in the basement of the records office flipping through file boxes that smelled like wet cedar. On a Thursday, the sky spit little balls of snow like the weather couldn't commit. I found a folder labelled Dogwood Ridge, 1992, and inside was my husband's handwriting beside Doc Griner's. Vein confirmed, micron gold, mineable with patience and water, not for sale. There were assay sheets that looked boring on purpose. There was a little diagram of the creek and a note. Need to talk to Ruth about how to do this without making enemies. I laughed out loud and put my hand over my mouth like I'd been caught in church. Then I cried, quietly, because it felt like Eli had been talking to me the whole time and I'd just finally found where he left the words. It wasn't a fortune yet. It was a possibility. It was a record that we had known, that matters in the end. I took copies. I wrote down book and page numbers, especially book 1872, page 961. A mineral reservation we had recorded in 2004 when we refinanced after Caleb broke his wrist and needed surgery we couldn't cash flow. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table with a notary and Eli saying, "If anything happens to me, I want to be sure nobody can strip this place for parts." I had thought it was paranoia. It was love. Kendra stopped by a week later with a binder. "Okay, so we have 3 offers if you want to sell as is. The highest is $340. It's from a couple in Raleigh. They're cash, no contingencies, and they'll let you keep the furniture." I choked on a laugh. "They'll let me keep my own furniture." "They're being generous," she snapped. "You have 1 bathroom, and you haven't painted since Obama." I let that one pass, too. "What do you get out of this?" I asked. Not accusatory. Curious. She blinked, like she hadn't expected me to be direct. "The usual, Ruth. I get paid to market." She swallowed. "And we can put the proceeds in a high-yield account for you. It's safer." "And where do you think I'd live?" She put her hand over mine. "There's a lovely place near us called Magnolia Grove, independent living. They have a shuttle to Trader Joe's. An old folks' home. Community," she corrected. "It's social." "I have a community," I said. "It's people who bring casseroles when someone's truck dies and they don't ask for a Venmo." She stood and patted my hand as if I had croup. "You'll see it's for the best. And Caleb agrees." That stung. My boy would agree to anything that felt like smoothing over, because conflict to him is a car with a wobble. Get out the jack, fix it quick, get home. He's not a schemer. He is a son who wants his wife to stop being anxious. That little piece of truth is what kept me from turning Kendra's binder into kindling. The first real alarm bell came from my friend Joan, who works as a receptionist at Dr. Patel's. "You were on the schedule for a capacity evaluation?" she said over the phone, voice low like we were passing notes in class. "Do you know about that?" "I do now," I said, and my hand went cold. "Who put it on there?" "Your daughter-in-law called last week," Joan said. "Said you'd been losing words." I can lose a word and find it again. I know the difference between a lapse and a theft. I called Caleb. He said, "Mom, it's just safer to have a baseline." "It's just safer to eat the things you kill," I shot back. "But we still use grocery stores. When were you going to tell me?" He sighed. He does that when he's caught between the woman he married and the woman who raised him. It's not a big deal. It is to me. To my shame now, I went. I did the appointment because I wanted to show them. I aced the clock drawing and the recall. I missed one item on the list because I was thinking about the creek. Dr. Patel said, "You're fine, Ruth." He smiled, quick and reassuring. "You're sharper than half the doctors in town, but I'm supposed to write that you could use support managing complex finances. Jokes on them. None of us know what those are anymore." I laughed. I cried in my car later. I looked at the photo of Eli I keep clipped to my visor and said, "Well, now what?" And I went home and called someone I never thought I'd need. Legal aid of the foothills. They set me an appointment with a lawyer named Hannah Price, who wore her long braid like a timeline down her back. I told her everything. About the map, about Kendra, about the capacity test, about the mineral reservation. She listened. She asked good questions. She said, "We can record a new instrument. We can do it quietly." "What kind of instrument?" I asked, picturing trumpets in a parade, because the word had a taste like brass. "A trust. A mineral trust. We can split your estate into surface and subsurface if it isn't already clean. And you can assign the mineral rights to a foundation now that you control." "Me? Controlling a foundation?" I laughed. "Do I have to wear pearls?" "Only if you want to." "For what?" I asked. This is not money to spin straw into more money. If there's anything under there worth a nickel, I want it to count. For scholarships, for the nursing home staff, for the church pantry, for the kids who think the only way out is a football they'll never catch. You decide, Ruth. So that's what we did. Quietly. My neighbour Mabel, who knows everyone including the notaries, helped. We created the Dogwood Ridge Education Foundation with 2 trustees besides me, Hannah and our pastor's wife, Loretta, because I believe in checks and balances. We recorded a mineral reservation and option agreement referencing Book 1872, page 961, affirming that the mineral estate was severed and held by the foundation. We included a rider, simple and iron. If the surface estate is transferred without the grantor's notarized consent, the foundation's 99-year lease on the mineral estate activates at $1, and any attempt to mine without the foundation's approval triggers injunctive remedies and treble damages. It's not even fancy law. It's just careful. We also did something that made my stomach flip. We drafted a springing, durable power of attorney in favor of my friend Loretta instead of Caleb, in case I was ever actually incapacitated. Not inconvenient. If you know, you know. 2 weeks later, a sheriff's deputy came to the door with a paper clipped to his pocket. "Mom, I need you to come with me." I was standing with a jar of green beans in one hand and a dish towel in the other. "For what?" He looked uncomfortable. "There's a temporary guardianship. Judge signed it this morning. It says you can't be alone." I laughed because the alternative was my heart turning into a hummingbird. "Which judge?" I asked. He named one who liked to be called Judge, capital J. The order had been filed by an elder law attorney I had never met, a man named Gregory Statler, who'd attached an affidavit from Kendra about how I left the stove on and wandered at night. I have a gas stove that goes off when I let go. I sleep like a tombstone. "I'm going to pack a bag," I told him, "and then I'm going to call my lawyer." It's a strange thing to have your life scooped up in a single afternoon and put in a plastic bin with R. McAllister written on masking tape. It's a stranger thing to have your daughter-in-law hug you too hard at the door of Pinecrest Care and say, "This is just for now," while your son looks at his shoes. I walked past a bulletin board with pictures of smiling women at craft tables and thought, you can't put me in here like a houseplant. There were good people at Pinecrest. I'm not going to make villains out of women who change sheets for a living and smile with their whole faces. Yolanda, my favourite nurse, had a laugh like a bell. She smuggled me coffee that tasted like coffee and not sadness. Mr. Sutter, across the hall, was a retired machinist who knew every small engine there ever was. He taught me how to fix the wheezy fan on the porch with a Q-tip and WD-40. Don't let anyone tell you old people don't know hacks. Kendra decorated my room with a framed print that said, Today is a gift in script. I took it down on the first day and used the frame for my map. That was the second day I cried. I allowed myself 1 tear a day, like a vitamin. Days became measured in small tyrannies. A staffer who corrected me when I said room instead of apartment. A woman at the front desk who called me sweetie like I had traded in my name for a ticket. Caleb signing a document at the nurse's station without meeting my eye. The first time Kendra brought a couple by the farm for a walk-through, and I could see them in a picture on her Instagram, smiling with my house behind them while I watched from a chair that smelled like bleach. Do you know how rage can feel like nausea? I do. Remember this. I am not a woman who takes her power from stealing it back in a scene. I am a woman who puts pebbles in the right place so the water moves how it should when it rains. That's what I told myself when I gave Hannah power to file an appeal of the temporary guardianship and to request an evidentiary hearing. That's what I told myself when I used Mr. Sutter's knowledge to hide a small digital recorder in the crocheted throw Kendra insists on draping over the couch at open houses because she thinks it makes my furniture look boho. It's not illegal in this state to record in your own home. I made sure. And I wanted to hear what she said when I wasn't there to make her soften it. What we caught on that recorder was not criminal, not by itself. It was gross. It was Kendra telling the developer, a man named Brock Linton, who wore his shirts too tight so you could see his pectorals strain, that my property was a blank slate and that the old woman won't know the difference. It was him chuckling and saying, "It's such a steal," and her laughing like that was a joke and not God's scoreboard. It was Brock telling her he had a geologist who'd sampled the creek and found extreme potential. I took that audio to Hannah. She took it to an assistant attorney general named Paula Greer, whose job, it turns out, is to investigate elder fraud. The phrase makes you feel 88 just hearing it. She sat in Hannah's office with a legal pad and a face you could plant beans in, plain and straight. And she said, "Mrs. McAllister, would you like to make a formal complaint?" "I would," I said. And that was the moment the shift clicked into place. That's when the story stopped being a hallway full of petty hurts and started being a case. While the appeal wound through the courthouse like molasses in January, the sale went through. They got it listed and under contract in 5 days, because that's what happens when you price a property at half its value. $340,000. "You came out ahead," Caleb said over the phone, like he was reading off a brochure. "It's a good price for a place without updates." "What's an update?" I said. "Is that like a hug, but for kitchens?" I was mean because he was talking to me like a customer. I hung up and went into the Pinecrest garden and yelled into a bush. Yolanda came outside and pretended to check the fountain. She put her hand on my back. "Let them do what they're gonna do," she said. "You do what you know." What I knew was the clause. In the mineral reservation, in the trust. In the rider, Hannah filed the day after the sale recorded because she timed it like a woman who has learned how to play chess. The sale had transferred the surface estate. The mineral estate had been reserved years ago and was now locked tighter with a 99-year lease to the foundation. The buyer, the developer's LLC, West Fork Properties, owned pasture and fence posts. He did not own the earth under it. You cannot dig up what you do not own. You cannot take water and run it where you mustn't. The law is slow, but it can be a friend if you respect it before you need it. There is a particular hell in watching a person who loved you become a parrot for someone else's script. Caleb visited one Sunday and brought me a pecan pie from the diner. He set it on my table and sat too straight in the chair. He said, "Mum, this is temporary. You'll see. We'll get you into something safer, and then we can..." In what world is "we sold your home while you were in a nursing home" the opening to a sentence that ends with anything good? I asked. I had promised myself I would not raise my voice. I did not. It still felt like a grenade rolled under the table between us. He rubbed his forehead like math had hurt him. We're trying to do what's best. No, you're trying to do what's easiest. For you. That's not fair. Fair is getting up at 4 a.m. to pull a calf that's come breech, I said. Fair is writing a whole senior paper with a kid who doesn't know how to use a comma and not letting anyone know his grandmother cleaned houses so he could have a chance. Fair is not a brand of house paint, Caleb. He looked like he wanted to cry. He did not. He is his father's son. He hugged me and left. I ate the pie and put the dish in my closet because I didn't want to give it back yet. The sale closed on a Friday. On Monday, trucks rolled up to my farm. Men in boots hopped out and set up tape and put on vests the colour of road cones. The creek hissed like a secret being told, and I was stuck in a room with a TV that only showed channels where women who look like Kendra sell you face cream. That was the day I stopped sleeping. That was the day I changed from something soft into something with an edge. Hannah filed an emergency motion to restore me to my home pending a full hearing. The judge, another one, same club, set a date 3 weeks out. The Mining Commission scheduled a hearing for the developer's permit for water usage and for noise variance, and for all the little pieces you need to legally rip open a place. That hearing was set in the very courthouse where all my Christmas pageants had happened and half my heartbreaks. We can win there, Hannah said, if we keep our heads. I intend to, I said. But I am also going to call someone who knows a rock from a rock. Her eyebrows went up. A geologist? I smiled. Or two? I called Dr. Bethany Crider at the State University, who I'd met once at the church when she was doing some field work and needed permission to walk down Kate's Road. She remembered me because I had brought her a jar of pickled okra. Miss Ruth, she said, lively. What can I do for you? You can tell me if there is a reason men with expensive boots are standing in my creek, I said. And you can tell me how I can make them regret it if they are. She laughed. I can't promise regret. But I can tell you what they're after and how they have to do it if they want to follow the law. We met at the farm at dawn the next day. It was mist and birdsong and the taste of metal in the air that you only notice when someone is looking for it. She took samples and photographs. She pointed out bedrock that had been cut by water until it shone. There's gold here, she said, straightforward. Not big pieces, flour gold. You need patience. You need careful systems. You need 10 times as much water as you think. And you need to not care if you make enemies, which you probably do. She smiled at me. Do you care? I care, I said. I just care about different things. 2 days before the hearing, the Assistant Attorney General Paula called. We're looking into your daughter-in-law, she said, formal, and into the attorney who filed the guardianship. There may be a pattern. I can't say more. I understand, I said. What should I do? Be ready. And if you have anything about the sale being rushed or undervalued, bring it. I had something. It came from the throw blanket recording. Kendra, tipsy after a showing, saying, It doesn't matter what it's worth, because once the permit goes through, we can sell it to Brock's main company at a markup, and Caleb will get a bonus. She said it like she was planning a party. That piece of audio fell into place in my head like a bead on a string. They had cooked the deal from the start. The low sale price wasn't ignorance. It was a step. Morning of the hearing, Pinecrest had French toast sticks, and the coffee was a little less sad. Yolanda gave me a hug that cracked my spine. "You go tell them," she said. "But don't get arrested. I need someone here with sense." I put on my good blue dress, the one with pockets, and my mother's brooch. I got a ride with Loretta, who drove her minivan like a getaway car. We prayed in the parking lot, not for winning, but for steady hands. Then I walked into the courthouse, where I had once carried cupcakes for Jessie's second-grade class, past men I had known since kindergarten, into a room that smells like pledge and old words. It is a funny thing, watching people who have been telling a story see a new page someone else has written. The developer arrived in a suit, the colour of morning fog, smiling like he was about to win a golf game he had cheated at. Kendra had a binder and a new blouse. She was wearing the kind of boots that have never sunk in mud. Caleb stood behind her, looking like a man who had forgotten what he meant to say. The county commissioners, 3 men and 2 women, shuffled papers with expressions like they were deciding whether to allow a new Walmart. The chairman called the docket. Brock's lawyer, a slick woman with sharp eyeglasses, made the opening. She said all the right things about jobs and tax revenue. She said the creek would be protected. She said the operation would be low impact. She did not say the word gold, like it was obscene. She didn't have to. Everyone in that room had heard it in whispers all week, because small towns keep secrets, like a sieve keeps water. Then it was my turn. I stood. I walked to the microphone with my cane tapping a rhythm I did not feel, but used anyway. "I have something you need to see," I said. "I am the owner of the mineral estate at Dogwood Ridge. The surface estate was recently transferred under a cloud I will address later. But for the purpose of this hearing, what matters is the mineral reservation and the attached rider. Read the clause." That's where we started. That's where you saw the room go very quiet. The clerk held the paper like it was a live thing. She read, "This parcel is subject to a mineral reservation recorded in Book 1872, page 961, and to a mineral lease rider recorded in Book 2049, page 12, granting a 99-year exclusive lease to the Dogwood Ridge Education Foundation. Any extraction without written permission from said foundation shall immediately enjoin such activity and subject the violator to treble damages." Brock's smile stayed, but it turned. If you watch animals enough, you can see the moment a dog realizes the fence has an electric wire on it. He cleared his throat. "We purchased the property in good faith," he said. "We were not advised of any such—" "It was on your title search," Hannah said, stepping forward like a dancer hitting her mark. "You signed the acknowledgement." His lawyer blustered. "This is not germane to the hearing," she began, and that was when a woman I didn't recognize stood from the back and flashed a badge. "I think it is," she said, voice carrying. "Assistant Attorney General Greer. We have an active investigation into the sale of this property and into the guardianship proceedings that removed Mrs. McAllister from her home. We are issuing a hold to preserve the status quo until the court reviews whether the transfer should be voided as fraudulent." Every head turned. Kendra's mouth actually fell open. I had never seen her look surprised. Not truly. She collects surprises for other people and serves them with bows. She turned to Caleb like he could solve it by making a spreadsheet, and he shook his head. His face looked like a man who had noticed his house is on fire and is trying to decide whether to open the fridge. "Regardless," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you cannot approve a water allotment for someone who does not have the right to use it for what they say they will. If this commission does not want to be part of a mess, deny the permit until it's clean. And there's one more thing," Hannah said. "If the court finds the guardianship was obtained fraudulently, every act done under it can be unwound. That includes the sale. She looked at Brock like he was a boy caught with a slingshot. How much did you say you paid? $340. That's cute. The room tittered, like a congregation that just heard a preacher make a joke about sex. It wasn't nice. It was true. It had the bite of a remedy that people like to see, applied when they themselves have never needed one. Brock's lawyer went into motion. She objected. She moved to strike. She called the AG out of order. The chair, to his credit, looked like a man who wants to be re-elected and notices that every voter he recognizes is staring at him like they are writing down his name. He said, "We are tabling this. No permits will be issued until the court clarifies title." Caleb finally looked at me. His eyes were wet. He mouthed, "I'm sorry." I nodded. It was not absolution. It was permission to start down the road where it could exist. That was the beginning of the unraveling. That was where people began to remember the part of themselves that knew what fair looked like when it wasn't wearing their friend's face. The AG issued subpoenas to Brock's company and to Kendra for communications about the sale. They found emails, of course they did, because people like Kendra think deleting a message makes it new snow. They found a text where she wrote to the elder law attorney, "We need the order this week, so we can close before the county looks under the hood." They found a voicemail from a woman at a bank laughing about Grandma's place. The guardianship hearing, 2 weeks later, felt like a slow-motion replay of a car crash with pauses for people to pass around popcorn. The judge was brisk. Hannah laid out the facts. Dr. Patel testified that I had capacity. Joan testified about the appointment Kendra had scheduled without telling me. The elder law attorney looked like a man who had eaten a bite he knew he shouldn't and was hoping to get through dessert. The judge vacated the guardianship with a sentence that tasted like vinegar. "This court finds that the order was improvidently granted and that Mrs. McAllister is capable of managing her affairs." He added the words, "for now," because men like him can't resist a tent peg to come back to. But he added it. It was done. I went home the next day. Those first steps into the kitchen were like meeting my body again after a long sleep. I put my hand on the counter where the varnish had worn down around the sink. I said, "We're okay, because sometimes you have to tell your land it didn't do anything wrong. But this story isn't made for soft landings. It likes fireworks." The AG's office announced publicly that they were investigating a network of professional guardians and elder law firms who had processed dozens of guardianships out of Judge Capital J's docket during the last year, all of which resulted in quick property sales to LLCs with ties to the developer. You could hear the holler all the way to the next county. Women who looked like me lined up in the courthouse like it was vaccine day to tell their stories to people with clipboards who looked tired in a righteous way. It turned out I wasn't a story with a twist. I was a symptom. The county commissioners called a special meeting because no one likes to be the punchline on the 6 o'clock news. It was a zoo. People brought signs. Loretta prayed out loud. Brock tried to slither in without cameras catching him. Kendra came with sunglasses on and a new lawyer, the kind who doesn't have eyebrows so you can't tell when they're mad. Caleb came alone, and he sat on my left like he did when he was 5 and happy to be anchored there. The chairman rapped his gavel. "Mrs. McAllister," he said, nodding at me, accidentally respectful. "Did you have anything further?" "I do," I said. "In the spirit of what this is supposed to be, I have receipts." I held up a stack of paper. It wasn't meant for the cameras. It was meant for everyone who had rolled their eyes when I said, "Listen." "This is the audio," I said, "of my daughter-in-law and this developer discussing how to keep the sale price low so they could flip it inside the family of companies and take profit out of what my husband and I built without having to get their hands dirty in the eyes of the law. This is the email where she told the Guardian not to schedule my appeal until after the closing. This is the contract they signed that acknowledged the mineral reservation they then pretended not to know existed. And, because God is good and paperwork exists, this is the letter my husband wrote to our lawyer in 2004, instructing him never to let anyone sever the mineral estate from the foundation we planned, even if we were pressured by a smile in heels. The room laughed mean. I didn't enjoy it, but I was not sorry. Brock stood. He tried to say, "This is slander." Paula stood behind me. She said calmly, "It's evidence, Mr. Linton. Sit down." The chair asked for quiet, like a man watching a tornado on the horizon and telling his kids to get the helmets. "We will have order," he said. He looked at me. "Mrs. McAllister, do you seek to reverse the sale?" Hannah put her hand lightly on my arm. "We seek to void it," she said. "The sale was executed under a guardianship that should not have existed, based on misrepresentations to the court. The price was unconscionable in the circumstances. The deed did not transfer the mineral estate, and the parties acted in bad faith to manipulate a senior citizen out of her home. You always think the big moments are going to announce themselves with trumpets. This one sounded like rustling paper. The county attorney, who had been pretending to be wallpaper, cleared his throat. "The county cannot void the sale," he said. "But the court can, and in the meantime, we can pass a resolution prohibiting any permits for extractive use of that property for the next 12 months pending review." They voted. 5 hands went up. It was like a chorus line. People cheered because we didn't know yet to save it. That came later, when the court did the big thing. In the days that followed, the developer's accounts were frozen. The elder law attorney was suspended pending investigation. The professional guardian who had signed the initial order was arrested for taking kickbacks. And Kendra? She was not arrested. She was served. She was sued by the foundation and by me, personally, for civil fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. In the middle of all that, she called me. I didn't pick up the first time. I didn't pick up the second. The third time I did. Because I am a woman who likes to hear how people tell on themselves when they think they still have a chance at the role. Her voice was small. I had never heard it that way. "Ruth," she said, "we need to talk." "We don't," I said, "but go ahead." "I didn't mean for this to happen." "What did you mean to happen?" She swallowed. "I meant for us to finally be okay. Rich," I said. "You meant to be rich and not have to say it. You have no idea what it's like to live in a house where everything is an argument," she snapped, dropping the mask for a second. "To have a husband who says no to buying anything because his mother taught him $1 is a sin. I have been patient." "You have been hungry," I said. "All it ever did was make you think other people owed you dinner." There was silence. Then, too late, the apology. It was not for me. It was for her own self she wanted to be handed back. "I'm sorry," she said, and it sounded like a word she had never chewed before. I said, "I will not be the woman you practice remorse on." And I hung up. I did not feel like a hero. I felt like a field after a burn. Clean, empty. Waiting for what I had already planted to come up again. The court voided the sale 3 weeks later. They did not do it because of sentiment. They did it because guardianships are not supposed to be hammers you buy at a store. The order read, in language that did not sing but still made my heart do a little jig, "The conveyance is rescinded ab initio." It meant we were putting the calendar back. It meant the deed that made Brock King evaporated like a bad breath. There was still the matter of the gold. It is one thing to block a thief. It is another to decide what to do with what he wanted to steal. I went back to the creek with Dr. Kreider. We talked about methods that would not poison the water. We talked about silt fences and recirculation systems, and how sometimes the best way to get value out of something is to not touch it until you can do it right. She told me the number they'd whispered, the $67 million, was a speculation. It assumed a lot. It assumed patience. It assumed price and time. She said, "Ruth, that number is a symbol for people. What do you want this to be a symbol for?" "Education," I said without thinking, "and dignity. And a long middle finger to anyone who thinks women like me are trash you put in a nursing home to make us quiet." She laughed. "I can get behind that." We structured a deal. We gave a small, responsible outfit, Hill and Hollow Minerals, family-run and boring in all the best ways, a 10-year contract to perform pilot extraction on a tiny portion of the creek, with strict environmental controls and monthly inspections by the Foundation. They would share profits with the Foundation at 25%. If at any time they cut a corner, the contract terminated. If they struck it rich, so would every kid in Laurel County who wants to learn about something other than how to leave. The first check came 6 months later. It wasn't a TV show check. It wasn't a lottery. It was enough to replace the roofs of the nursing home and the library. It was enough to endow the Dogwood Ridge Scholarship for first-generation students. It was enough to stand on my porch at dusk and feel my husband grinning down the lines of the orchard. Kendra and Caleb separated. You should know that happened, not because I demanded it, or because we are the sort of people who kick someone when they're down. It happened because Caleb looked at his life and said, "This is not who I want to be." He apologized to me in my kitchen with his hand over his mouth like he was keeping his heart in. He said, "I wanted things to be easy. I made them cruel." I said, "You can come home." And I meant it, and I also meant, "You will need to grow." He did. He got therapy like a grown man with a boy inside doing push-ups. He bought his own tools, not for anyone else's house, but for his own quiet. He sat with Jesse at the diner, and they talked like men about how hungry can turn into honest work if you feed it right. They fixed my fence, and it stayed fixed. That is my favorite kind of redemption. Screws tightened and no speech. The AG's office announced charges. The elder law attorney pled to lesser charges. The professional guardian cried and said she didn't understand. She understood. The judge resigned. The developer was indicted for wire fraud because he had sent emails across state lines that said one thing to his investors and another to the county. It turns out greed is boring, and the federal government is allergic to it. I went to one of the hearings because I wanted to watch a man learn what he really weighs when he can't buy a scale. And then there was the payoff I did not expect. It happened at the county fair. They asked me to judge the canned goods because the usual judge had a hip replaced. I wore a ribbon the color of a robin's egg and walked up the steps of the main hall slowly, because it is a fact of my life that stairs will always make themselves known. The same men who had pretended not to see me 3 months earlier when they were smiling at Brock's lease walked up and took their hats off in front of me like I had become a different species of person. It felt good in the way warm pie feels good. Familiar, sweet. But you know it won't last past tomorrow's breakfast, so you don't put too much weight on it. They asked me to say something into the mic at the talent show. The new chair of the board, an earnest woman who wears her hair up because she's tired, handed it to me. "Tell us how to do better," she said. I said, "Stop believing the story money tells you about the people who love you. Trust the ones who show up with casseroles. Make old things new without pretending the old things were bad, because they are old." I looked for Jesse. He was in the back, arm over a girl's shoulder, pretending not to care what I said. That's fine. The words aren't for right now. They're seeds. Time jump. Because that's how life goes. 7 months later, I am sitting in the learning barn. That's what we built with the second and third checks. It's a room with books and cheap furniture that will last, with a chalkboard you can move, with posters of odd shapes and the word possibility written wrong on purpose so a kid can correct it and feel like he caught something. Yolanda from Pinecrest brings her niece for the STEM Saturdays. Mr. Sutter teaches kids how to fix a lawnmower. Loretta runs a GED prep class out of the back office and brings donuts that taste like tenderness. We have a plaque on the creek path that says, "To the good men and women of Laurel County who keep their hands clean and their hearts stubborn." We built this with what they wanted to take. It's not poetic, but people touch it when they pass, like it's a pew. Kendra moved to Charlotte. She started a new podcast about starting over. I do not listen. Not because I'm mean, because I have learned to let people build their own fences. Caleb and Jesse come over on Sundays and pretend they're not looking at me to gauge whether I'm okay. I am mostly okay. I am older. I am not fragile. I am a woman with a landline and a good lawyer and a creek that knows my name. And because I know a good loop when I see one, I'll tell you how the hearing finally ended. All those months ago, when I said read the clause, there was a second part. After the clerk finished, she looked at me and said, "Mrs. McAllister, do you have anything else?" I said, "Yes. Play the tape." She hit a button. We all listened to voices that pretended love and meant leverage. We heard the word bonus fall out of a mouth like a penny you don't deserve to hold. And then we sat in the silence that comes when a whole room decides to breathe differently. If this kind of story resonates with you, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. I do read the comments, and I hope you'll share your own stories of fighting for your family with dignity. I keep the map now in a frame on the wall of the kitchen, next to a photograph of Eli with his hands in his pockets, looking like a man who knew what he had, even when it fit in a mason jar. On rough days, I stand and look at those two things, and I think about the seam of gold underfoot that we will draw from slow enough to not forget what we were trying to make of it. I think about the phrase I told you to remember, not the quick way, the right way. There's one last thing. It's a small thing, but I promised a callback. When Kendra teased me about the jelly the first day she came with her binder, I told her it was nice. It was store-bought. After the county fair, I got a box in the mail. No return address. Inside, a jar of jelly with a handwritten label that said, simply, homemade. I didn't eat it. I put it on the shelf where my grandson's comic book still lives. It is my reminder that some people you forgive the way you keep a jar, sealed, visible, not for you. When they sit around in law school and talk about cases, they will not talk about mine. It is not elegant. It is full of messy people. It is, however, what America looks like when it's behaving. Not perfect. Better than the easy thing. We were our own neighbors. We minded our business and minded each other. We took bad plans and turned them into blueprints for good ones. The creek still shivers its secrets. I still wake up sometimes thinking I'm at Pinecrest because I can smell lemon cleaner in my dreams. I still talk to Eli at the Oak and tell him, like a child shows the report card, "Look, we did it. We did. Not with magic, with paper, with patience, with phrases like read the clause, and with a whole lot of people who, when asked to be decent, remembered how."